Let me show you the exact settings you should be using on your new Osmo Pocket 4P for the best possible results, and show you a couple of hidden features and settings that no one ever talks about but will make a big difference in how your videos look. Let's dive straight into the first settings, where we'll be covering resolution and frames per second. To enter the menu, simply swipe up from the bottom, and here we can see we can film in 4K or in 1080p. If you are in the portrait mode, you will be able to choose 1080p or 3K. Now for the FPS, you can choose between 24, 25, 30, 48, 50 and 60. For the most cinematic result, we're going to use 24 FPS in combination with 1/50th shutter speed, but I'll explain more on that later. Depending on where you live, you might need to change the FPS from 24 to 25 to avoid flickering lights in your videos. 30 FPS is more of an in-between, gives you a couple frames extra per second in case you want to slow down footage a little bit, but both options are good. And then your question probably is, when do I use 60 FPS? And 60 FPS is if you want sharp footage, less motion blur, and you will have more flexibility when you want to slow clips down. So for example, filming action sports, or if you just like the aesthetic more of less motion blur, sharper image. Now let's change back from 60 FPS to 24 FPS and head into the exposure settings. For all beginners, I recommend just using the auto mode and just focus on what you're filming and how you're filming it, and not worry too much about the settings. The only thing that I would change is going down here in this menu, go into image adjustment and set texture to -2 and noise reduction to -1. And changing these two simple settings will just reduce the over sharpening and the digital look that you often get from these pocket cameras. So if you're a complete beginner, I wouldn't change anything else in these settings. Now let's come back to something that I said earlier. If you want the most cinematic result, you'll need to be filming in 24 FPS with 1/50th shutter speed to have that smooth motion blur and that cinematic feel. To be able to do this, you'll need to head into the Pro mode and click open the exposure tab and switch from auto to manual. On the left side, you'll see the shutter speed, which you can change by scrolling up or down. And on the right side, you will see your ISO. So if you're filming in 24 FPS, we want to be using 1/50th shutter speed. I'm not gonna go into depth, but this will just make it so that you have smooth video and smooth motion blur. Then on the right side, the ISO, we have two options. We can either set it to semi-auto so that the camera still auto-adjusts the exposure, or we can set it to a fixed value. If you want to use the semi-auto mode so that the camera still adjusts the exposure automatically, then scroll up and select either 100 to 1600 ISO or 100 to 800. If you're filming in low light, you'll need to bump this up, but I try to limit how high the ISO can go to reduce noise later on. So during the day, I'd recommend staying anywhere between 100 to 800 or 100 to 1600. In a low light scenario, just bump it up to whichever is needed to have correct exposure. And correct exposure, what I mean by that is this little EV in the top left corner will show a number. Right now we're at 0.0, which means we are correctly exposed. Anywhere between -0.3 and +0.3 is ideal. So if you see this say -3, for example, or +3, then you know you're either really underexposed or really overexposed, and you need to change your settings. But with this semi-automatic setup, where the ISO still changes automatically, but we just have a fixed shutter speed, this will always be 0, or the camera will always work to have it at 0. If you want to change this, for example, what I like to do personally is select that EV in the top left corner and drag it to -0.3 to try and protect the highlights so that they don't clip. Now, if you want to go full manual mode, we would need to switch the ISO to a fixed number. So let's say during the day, it's a bright sunny day, we can use a fixed ISO of 100, for example. But in low light, we might need to go up to, let's say, 3200. I'm currently still in the normal color mode, where it is recommended to use ISO 100 for the best results. But as you can see right now, I am underexposed, so I'll need to change this number to make this EV say 0.0 or as close to it as possible. So at 1600, I am correctly exposed. But the higher the ISO, the more noise you have in your footage. What ISO is the best will change on what color mode you're using, so let's dive into that right now. So to change the color mode, you can scroll down and open the color settings. And right now we are in normal 10-bit, but we can switch to D-Log 10-bit and D-Log 2 10-bit. I personally like using D-Log 10-bit because I can use both lenses, and in D-Log 2, I'll set it to D-Log 2, you'll see that if I try to zoom in, it will say 10-bit D-Log 2 only supports 1x zoom. Now yes, D-Log 2 has better dynamic range than D-Log, but I prefer just using D-Log so that I can use both lenses without having to switch the color profile. If you do want to use D-Log 2, just know that the base ISO for D-Log 2 is 1600. But again, I like using D-Log instead of D-Log 2 so that I can use both lenses. And one other little thing is set color recovery to on so that you can see what your footage will actually look like after converting it back to normal looking color. If you have it on off, it will show the D-Log format, so it will look all gray and washed out. Now, if you want to use a fixed ISO with D-Log, then just know that the base ISO, so the best one, for D-Log is 400. In D-Log, you will only be able to set 400 to 6400 as an ISO range for the semi-automatic setup, so that the exposure corrects automatically. And another important thing is, no matter what color mode you're in, if you're using a fixed shutter speed, if you're, for example, outside, you will likely be overexposed during the day. So if it's a sunny day or even a cloudy day, it will likely be overexposed at 150, and that's exactly where ND filters come in. So if you want to use a fixed shutter speed, make sure you also have ND filters. Now onto all the other settings. For white balance, I like to use auto white balance when I'm just running around and shooting a bunch of different things, maybe vlogging, just to avoid that I constantly have to change the different settings. Same with the exposure, I like to use the semi-auto mode so that I can still get the benefit of the fixed shutter speed while also having my exposure automatically regulated by the ISO. Because if you don't have this, for each shot you have to take, you'll need to change the ISO and the ND filter to have the correct exposure. But if you set it to an ISO range from 400 to 6400, it will automatically adjust, and the only time you'll need to change the ND filter is when you're overexposed. Now, if you're filming shot by shot, and you want to make sure that your white balance is always the same, because maybe you're in like a fixed lighting environment where nothing changes, then you can tap into white balance, set it to manual, and select the one you want to use. Another little tip you can use is, let's say I mess this up completely. If you want to get the correct auto white balance without having to change the settings for yourself, just switch to auto white balance. It will auto adjust. And then switch back to manual, and then it will be stuck at that specific setting. So you could set up a shot, set it in auto white balance to get the right white balance, switch it to manual so that it doesn't change while you're recording. And then for your next shot, do the same thing. You change your camera position or what you're filming, switch it to auto, and switch it back to manual right before you start filming. This way the white balance won't change while recording. Then again, the glamour effects I have off, same as in the previous menu. Breathing compensation I like to set to on, and focus mode to continuous. And again, the image adjustment here is set to -2 for texture and -1 for noise reduction. Now let's dive into some of those hidden settings and swipe from the top to the bottom. First thing we're gonna do is head into the actual settings icon and change the bitrate from standard to high. If you're filming in log, this will already be in high. Then joystick speed, I like to just have it at 2. Then we're gonna scroll down. If your storage is full, make sure you have all your footage from the camera on a different card or on your computer or on a hard drive. Then head into the storage setting, click again on storage, and you'll be able to format either the internal storage or your SD card. This will clear everything off of it, so that's again why you need to make sure that you have everything backed up that you need. Then for the gimbal settings, we like to set our gimbal to follow mode using the rotational speed slow. This will ensure we get super smooth shots when filming. There won't be any abrupt movements, but in case you are, for example, vlogging, you want the camera to react a little bit faster, or you're filming sports maybe, you might want this to fast so that the gimbal reacts much faster compared to slow. But for cinematic shots, setting the rotational speed to slow is a hidden little gem that not a lot of people talk about. Now for vlogging, follow might not always be the ideal mode, which is why we also often recommend this last mode, the FPV, since the camera will point in the same direction as the touchscreen, which makes it function a little bit like an iPhone, always pointing in the direction where the touchscreen is facing. You can also set up custom buttons if you want. I have one set up, the single press, and I set it to rotate gimbal. So instead of having to press this 3 times or have to touch the touchscreen, I can just click this button and switch the camera around. You can set this to a ton of different settings. You can just choose whichever one makes sense for you. Then in the second slide, we're gonna head into the grid option and turn on the first grid. This will give us lines across the screen so that we can frame our shots better. Then again, in that second screen, I like to turn the sounds from high to either medium or low. In this case, I'm going to set it to low. Another little thing that you might want to change is this second icon on the top row. Right now it's set to automatically change how I'm filming based on how the screen is positioned. So right now I'm in landscape mode. If I were to flip the screen in, I would be filming in portrait mode. But let's say you're filming for YouTube and you always want to film in landscape mode. You can tap this icon once, and now no matter what the screen is like, it will always be in landscape mode. Even with the screen like this, you will be filming in landscape mode. And if you want to always film in portrait, you can tap it again and always film in portrait, no matter what the screen orientation is like. For me, again, I like to keep it on auto since I switch between landscape and portrait quite often. Then on your main screen, you can tap this middle icon to change what your joystick does. So right now, the joystick controls the tilt of the camera and the position of the camera. But if I tap it again, it controls the zoom. So I can zoom in or out. And then some other hidden features are when you are recording, you can change the exposure from the main screen by swiping from the right to the left, like so. And then you can change how the camera exposes. So I can do expose to +2, expose to -2, whatever I want. And let's say you're recording, but the recording is bad and you don't want to save this. Hold down the record button and it will cancel and delete that recording. You can also manage your storage straight from the main menu by swiping all the way to the right and choosing storage. You can again format your storage or see how much space you still have left. Now that you know all the different settings, let me show you exactly how to color grade D-Log in the easiest way possible so that you can get the most out of this camera and get the best videos possible. I'm inside of CapCut and I have 4 D-Log clips in our timeline. So 1 is with zoom and 3 are wide shots. And all I have to do to color grade these is head over to adjustments, and then inside of LUT, you'll see that I have our D-Log combination LUTs imported. All I need to do is just select whichever one I want to use. So let's say I want to use this one. I press the plus icon and I stretch it to cover all of the different clips. And then we go from D-Log to a color graded clip. And if you want to change to a different look, you can head over to this section on the right and just hover over all the different names. And you'll see that all the colors will change based on which one you select. So let's say I want to use this one instead. I just select it and I'm done. So if you want to transform your footage in the same easy way as I just showed you, head over to the link in the description and grab our LUT Bundle. And these combination looks and any of our other looks work in many other video editing softwares like DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro, VN Editor. It works in the DJI Mimo app, LumaFusion and many more, and they work across your computer, tablet and phone. So again, if you want these for yourself to add a D-Log in the easiest way possible, click the link in the description.